Hello, welcome to Inside Politics. I'm Anastasiya Lavrina. Two-pronged diplomatic push sees US Secretary of State Antony Blinken covered Jordan and Turkey, while National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan held talks in Israel, Qatar and Egypt. Top US officials were in the Middle East pushing for stability in Syria and an end to 14 months war in the Gaza Strip in a last-ditch diplomatic push by the outgoing Biden administration before President-elect Donald Trump takes office in a few weeks. What challenges and opportunities do Washington and Ankara face in reconciling their different priorities in the Middle East? More details in my program now. Joining me from Turkey is Enes, Bayrakli, political expert, Turkish-German University. And from the United States of America, we have Jason Epstein, international public policies expert. Dear experts, you're welcome to our program.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
Thank you very much. And my first question to the American expert, given the ongoing challenges in Syria, do you believe US-Turkish cooperation is truly effective, or is it more about maintaining geopolitical influence in the region?
If we're talking about what is currently taking place, we're looking at a placeholder administration that is soon out the door. And so we shouldn't expect very much to happen in the coming days. This is more like Antony Blinken, Secretary of State Blinken's farewell tour. He certainly has an agenda, but all of the parties with whom he's meeting understand that his viewpoints are not going to be official U.S. policy in 1 month from now, barely 1 month from now. So US-Türkiye relations, while they are cordial, we should not expect that much to take place over the coming days. Although, of course, with President-elect Trump already in conversations with various world leaders, we can start seeing some momentum come January, which will take effect January 20th.
Well, Enes, Secretary Blinken mentioned the need to prevent terrorist groups like Daesh and PKK from exploiting the Syrian conflict. Given the complex dynamics in the region, how can the US and Turkey effectively cooperate without exaggerating tensions with other groups in Syria who have been crucial in the fight against ISIS?
So I think first and foremost...
Yes, please. Go ahead. Enes.
Okay. Well, first and foremost, for Turkey, the presence of PKK in Syria is a red line. Because PKK was established 4 decades ago, and its aim to create a state in the southeast of Turkey, and its presence in Syria, in northern Syria, in northern eastern Syria, is a huge risk to Turkey. So if PKK leaves Syria or lay down their arms, and then Turkey can accept a solution to this problem. What I mean is, of course, there are Kurds in Syria, and these Kurds, their rights has to be acknowledged and protected by the central government in Damascus. That's another issue. But currently the situation for PKK is not sustainable, because if you look at now the map of Syria, there is a new government in Damascus, and all different sects, religions, and ethnicities, they have accepted the authority of this new government. And the PKK is trying to survive in this environment and is occupying a huge sway of land, which is also predominantly Arabic. There is a huge Arabic population there in these parts of the Syria, and we have already seen uprisings in Raqqa and in other different cities. Of course, Daesh or ISIS is a problem, but I think the new government can manage this problem. And also there are other actors in the region who can also manage this problem. Turkey has always offered its cooperation and to deal the problem of ISIS together with the United States. But interestingly, US government at that time, starting with the Obama administration and then Biden, has decided to cooperate with PKK, which is very problematic because US acknowledges PKK as a terrorist organization. And of course, they are not using the name PKK in Syria, but that's not really, that really doesn't really make any sense. And nobody is really believing that that the PYD or any other group, that the different names they are using there, is actually reflecting the reality on the ground. So I think if United States acknowledges Turkey's priorities, that the other issues can be resolved, and there are already positive signs coming from Trump administration, and I think a solution can be found.
Jason, do you think that the solution can be found when Donald Trump comes to the White House in a few weeks? As our expert from Turkey mentioned previously, United States preferred to cooperate with PKK. Do you also think that it's happened, and what to expect from the future?
I agree. But it will take some. It will take some time. Every administration, and that will include Trump 47, always takes. There's always a process where new staff come in and plans need to be drawn up. So we shouldn't expect instant success. We shouldn't expect decisions to be made right away. But I do think over the course of 2025, that U.S. and Turkish officials will be able to reach more of an understanding. When Secretary of State Blinken refers to denying territory to ISIS, when you hear these words, what he's really just saying is he is trying to support the SDF, which, as has been mentioned, is really the YPG PKK. So the Trump administration will have a different view. They also see some opportunities in terms of the weakening of the Iranian regime. They know that the SDF is going to be more beholden to U.S. proclivities, what the U.S. would like to see. And yes, a stronger central government in Damascus will probably put some pressure on certain Kurdish forces in the northeastern part of the country to play ball and to obviously respect Turkish influence.
Enes, apart from what's happening today in Syria, two sides also discuss the situation in Gaza, the expectation from Israeli side and Turkey, who may decide to influence the behavior and somehow influence the behavior of Hamas for the future. But what's interesting, Jake Sullivan, during his visit to Israel, said that Israel had emerged stronger. I will quote him. He said that we will make sure that Hamas can never threaten Israel in the way it did on October 7. So do you think that it may actually affect the future processes in the region when it comes to situation in Gaza? And where do you see the coordination between United States and Turkey in this particular issue?
Well, I mean, Israel can claim a military victory in Gaza and in Lebanon. But is it also a political victory? I don't think so. Because during this process, we have seen that many civilians have been killed. And now Israel is being accused of carrying a genocide in Gaza. There is a court case against the Prime Minister of Netanyahu and the former defense minister of Gallant. So Israel's image has been damaged extensively, and never in the history Israel's image has suffered so much. So this military victory comes with a cost. Even this military victory is not perfect or total victory. Yes, when Sullivan says that Hamas cannot threaten Israel anymore, or the way it has done before 7th of October, but still Israel was not able to eliminate Hamas or the Qassam from Gaza. and with time they will rebuild their capacity. So it's never really about military capacity of Hamas or Qassam in Gaza, but it's their will to resist Israeli policies. And this will, you cannot really destroy it with a military force. And this is accepted by many Israeli experts also. It's an ideology. So there has to be some kind of political settlement. And Israel has to acknowledge this. Although Israel is very powerful and militarily speaking, and nobody is denying this or debating this, yet this military superiority doesn't really translate into political superiority or victory. So that's the real problem here. And of course, if Turkey can help and other actors to facilitate a ceasefire in Gaza and it's an exchange of prisoners, then it will be from a humanitarian perspective a big victory for everybody, because the current situation in Gaza is not really sustainable. It's not sustainable for Israel as well, because Israel cannot stay there forever. Its military occupation and its forces there is it will be subject to attack in the future if they stay there, and it will be a nightmare for Israel. So there has to be a ceasefire in Gaza sooner than later. I mean, it's better sooner than later, yeah.
Jason, do you believe that there is still a possibility for Washington and Ankara to work together when it comes to the situation in Gaza, as both countries has sometimes totally different approach to the situation, what's happening in the Middle East?
This is where I diverge from the conversation that's taken place so far. For whatever reason, President Erdogan felt the need to promote very incendiary rhetoric about what's been going on in Israel and Gaza. Whatever the reason, the effect is that Israel does not see Turkey as an honest broker, and probably discussions are going to be with other neighboring countries, not with Turkey. That's not to say that Ankara can't play some sort of role. Certainly Hamas's presence inside Turkey is a sore spot for not just for Israel, but it will be for the incoming Trump administration as well. And I would also argue that October 7th was the military disaster, even the public relations disaster. In the Middle East, if you're not the strong horse, you are in deep trouble. You will be seen as prey. And October the 7th was the catastrophe, not just because of the dead and the hostages and the barbarity involved in the attacks. But since then, we've seen a resounding Israeli military victory. And yes, ideologies can't be conquered, but their ability to inflict harm on civilians and on the larger population of Israel is very limited today. So other countries in the region will adapt to the Israeli pop to some degree. There's also an understanding that were it not for Israel's engagement with Hezbollah in Lebanon, that the the overthrow of the Syrian regime might not have been possible. And so there'll be a lot of rhetoric, there'll be a lot of incendiary talk, but at the end of the day, I think the Trump administration can work with its regional partners, with Israel. Yes, there needs to be a ceasefire and the return of all hostages.
Jason, I'm sorry, I may ask one additional question from you. So it means that Washington expects from Ankara no intervention to the future negotiation process when it comes to the situation in Gaza, right?
I wouldn't say no intervention, but probably Turkey will be much more involved in places like Syria than in Israel-Gaza. You may see more Gulf interaction and Egyptian interaction in Israel-Gaza, whereas Turkey has an enormous role to play in the future of Syria, of course, and in terms of security cooperation.
Here's why National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan, as I mentioned previously, held talks probably in Israel, Qatar, and Egypt. Enes, do you support also the statement that for Turkey maybe it will be more beneficial to concentrate on the situation in Syria rather than to what's happening in Gaza? Do you believe in that?
Well, these issues are not really separated from each other. I mean, politically speaking, because whatever happens in Palestine, Gaza affects the whole Middle East in the first place. Secondly, if there is a ceasefire in Gaza and an agreement, that will be a huge relief for many governments all around the Middle East. And plus, the new government in Damascus, they will be also relieved, I think. And Turkey is now, of course, has taken a stance against Israel because what happened in Gaza, Turkey considered this as a genocide. But still Turkey can play a huge role because now Turkey is one of the biggest players in Syria. Syria is bordering Israel. There is no, both states, they don't recognize. There is not only a ceasefire. Israel is occupying parts of Syria. So now Turkey, through its influence in Syria, can stabilize this front, which will be beneficial for Israel as well. But in return, Israel has to take also some steps. So now Turkey has become somehow a player also in Israel's neighborhood, immediate neighborhood, in its borders. So that's quite a change. And I think other actors, they will also take this into consideration. Even Israel, I think they will take this into consideration. So I think current Israeli government, they don't have luxury to say, no, we don't want Turkey to be involved. Maybe not an honest broker, but I think Turkey will be a part of these negotiations.
That's a very good point you brought here, Jason. Israel has its own interest in Syria, and within the last days we could see that, according to the official statements, it was said that Israel is destroying the military objects in Syria as it can possess some threat for Israel. Therefore, we can see that the interests of Israel and Turkey is overlapping partially in Syria as well. Therefore, what to expect from the future approach of the United States, taking into account on these processes?
Well, you bring up a good point. There is cooperation, and some of it involves direct communications between Israeli and Turkish officials. We've heard that. Just because there is some political back and forth, some incendiary rhetoric back and forth, does not mean, for example, that Israeli and Turkish intelligence officials are not meeting and sharing important information. The elimination of the Shia Crescent was a priority for Israel, and it mattered to Turkey as well. Reduced Iranian influence matters, and it was important for Israel to not just weaken the Iranian regime, but also to ensure that the new government, just in case there were thought to be future hostilities between Israel and the new Syrian government, that it would not be able to utilize many of Assad's advanced weapons, and including perhaps chemical weapons. So Israel is prepared to wait and see how things go. But yes, there have been, just like Turkey has a presence inside Syria, Israel has a limited footprint as well. Mount Hermon is a good example. Also, there are some Druze villages that are currently under Israeli control. And it's a wait-and-see attitude to see how the new government in Damascus behaves. And this is an opportunity. I disagree with some of the talk you hear out of Washington that Turkey is no different from the Iranian regime. That's silly. Turkey is a NATO ally and has an important, a critical role to play on several fronts. And the Israelis are aware. The Israelis are aware of this, and they'd like nothing more than to have a thawing of the tension that's taken place. And if I may say one very quickly, Anastasiya, There's all this talk about how October 7th was a deliberate effort to sabotage Saudi-Israeli talks, that there would be diplomatic ties would be started. But what we overlook sometimes is that Turkey and Israel were really coming together again years after the Mavi Marmara incident. And it's fair to say that the barbaric attack on October 7th was also an attempt to rupture bilateral ties, Ankara and Jerusalem. And to some degree, it was successful.
Enes, please, about the growing role of Turkey in Syria, as we can see, some experts saying that Iran is losing its control in Syria due to the last changes. Russia is also going to leave. So it's more about Turkey and United States to find the compromise and move forward. And we all remember how Donald Trump, during his first presidency term, decided to withdraw its militaries from Syria, saying that it's not a top priority. Do you expect that Donald Trump, while coming to the White House again, will decide to change his approach to the situation in this country?
Well, I think Trump wants to disengage from Syria because I think he thinks this is not really in the United States' interest. And I think he is correct. But the thing is, Syria needs stability. Syria has been through hell in the last 13, 14 years. The country needs to be rebuilt. Millions of Syrians are refugees all around the world. They need to go back. And this first, we need to solve the problem with the PKK. Territorial integrity of the country has to be established. And then some kind of stability and then rebuilding effort. So in this sense, and the messages coming from the new Damascus administration shows that they are very pragmatic, and they will build a government which is very inclusive. And I think Turkey's influence has been influential in this new approach from Damascus government. So I think Israel's decision to bomb Syria was not a wise decision. Of course, they had the power to do it, and they said, let's do it. If we can do it, why not? Let's destroy the whole infrastructure, military infrastructure there. But let's see the situation. I mean, these military facilities or equipment that the Assad had and the current government had is very old Russian. Most of them are very old Russian equipment. And Israel has the military superiority. Israel could have destroyed this in the future as well. But its first message was occupy land and attack the country militarily. And it wasn't, I think, a wise decision to the new government in Damascus. And although this was a provocation, I think the Damascus government has managed the situation quite quietly, did not escalate, because they don't have power to counter Israeli attacks. I think this was a wrong decision from Israeli side. I think Israel shouldn't occupy more land in Syria, because it will be militarily, suicide if Israel will occupy more land in Syria or even attack Damascus. There is talk.
So one additional question, Enes. So it seems that from your point of view, if Israel may decide to stay in Syria or somehow affect the future development of this government, there will be a direct confrontation between Turkey and Israel, right?
Yeah, of course the tension will increase, not only with Turkey, but of course with the new Damascus government, because this government is new, and then there will be a popular pressure on the government to counter this. Because this is at the end of the day, this is a country, a state, international recognized state, sovereign state, and its lands are occupied by a foreign power, and it's increasing its attacks. So I think Israel has to stop and withdraw to the area it has started before. And of course, there is the question of Golan Heights, but that's another issue. That will be decided in the future. If Israel really wants to make peace with Syria in the future, of course, that will come to table, but not on the table now. But currently, the policy that Israel is pursuing is quite provocative, and it doesn't also help to. It won't also help Israel, I think, in the future. So it's a wrong start for a decision for a relationship with a neighbor.
Jason, we all know. Jason, we all know about close ties between Israel and United States of America. So, if there is a future escalation in Syria between Israel and Turkey, if the interests will be coincide, then what reaction we should expect from Washington? Do you expect United States to intervene to reduce the tension or somehow affect the future processes?
We should have enough confidence in the incoming Trump administration to ensure that it never gets to that point. And it's also worth noting there aren't going to be more attacks in the future, or they're going to be very limited. There is no, as far as I know, there's no desire on the part of Israel to go after the current government. This was limited to equipment and material that was under Assad regime control. It's also meant to ensure that if necessary, or at least we're being told that it may be necessary, if Israel decides to strike at the Iranian regime, it can now do so perhaps over Syrian airspace. There is no desire, I think, on the part of Ankara, there's no desire on the part of Jerusalem of putting themselves in a position where you could see direct conflict. Turkey's presence is mostly in the north. Israel's presence is mostly in the southern part of the country. And the United States is not going, moving forward, you're not going to see a Biden administration that just all it wants is for fighting to stop and no resolution to ongoing problems. With the Trump administration, there's an expectation that fighting will stop, but it's going to be the result of facts on the ground being altered. And that's what we've seen so far. And we should anticipate that Israel and Turkey it's going to be very slow, it may be painful at times, but there will be reconciliation over the next few years.
Well, dear expert, thank you very much for joining our discussion today.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you. And thank you, dear viewers, for watching Inside Politics. Stay with us. See you in the next edition.